Hello. As I was preparing for this, some people asked me, they said, why do you tell your story, Margaret? And here's why I tell my story. Because I know that there is another woman out there who will hear my story and say, she's me, she's just like me. And just as there are women who tell parts of their story that I'm not brave enough to share all of mine yet, I feel visible again. So my story is for those who don't feel ready to or don't have the platform to tell theirs yet. So here is my story. Trying to be perfect nearly killed me, and I didn't even realize what was going on for me. So when people ask me to describe myself, here's what I say. I'm a survivor of physical, emotional, and psychological abuse for almost my entire life. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I'm a survivor of burnout. I'm an emotional binge eater, and I'm going to get through that too. But here's what else I am. I am powerful, and I am wise, and I am perfect just as I am. And I am the queen of my own universe. Now, people who look at me now, they think, Margaret, you've got it all together. But that was only recently. And until recently, nothing could be further from the truth. I was just doing a really, really good job of hiding it, of wearing whatever mask I needed to wear to help me to fit in that time and place. So I spent the first 49 years of my life trying to be something else, anything else than who I really was, in order to be loved and accepted. Now, all of that brought me to depression, anxiety, health conditions such as high blood pressure. My hair was falling out. I had chronic diarrhea, adrenal fatigue. My nervous system was just a wreck. On top of that, I had really poor personal relationships, which I'll go into in a little while. And I was so unhappy. And this was just a repeated pattern over and over again. This quest to be perfect, it led me to take risks in my life, to marry and be in relationships with the wrong men. It led me to eating my feelings, shopping my feelings, but never ever showing my feelings. So where did it all begin? So my entire life, I've never felt good enough, and I've never felt able to actually form deep connections with people. I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And to understand this, we have to go right back to actually the very beginning of my life. Before I was even born, I didn't belong. From the time my mother knew she was pregnant with me, I was being rejected. I was given up for adoption when I was born by a young single mother who in the early 1970s in Australia, there was so much shame about teenage pregnancy, young mother pregnancy. So she had me, I was born, and I spent the first 4 months of my life somewhere, no one's really sure. So I don't know who saw my first smile. I don't know who held me when I was a baby. I know I was well cared for in children's homes under the government care. Until eventually at almost 4 months old, I was adopted into a family. And I had two other siblings who were adopted as well. So my adoptive parents couldn't have any children. And you know what? I had a middle class upbringing. I was raised with private school education. My family was very Catholic, quite strictly religious. And, we went on lovely holidays and on the surface, we had everything that we could possibly want. But I was a really soft, gentle child. And at the time, the word empathetic didn't exist. So I was just sensitive. I took things too personally and I needed to toughen up. But I felt everything really, really deeply and I didn't know what to do with that. And so being that very, very soft, gentle child in the family that I was born into was really challenging. And so my mother, in my primary school years in particular, had unmanaged bipolar, which meant that she, was often very, very erratic in her behaviour, which I didn't understand as a child. You don't know what this is. Or she would spend periods of time where she was taken from us and she would spend weeks on end in hospital and I was shipped off to live with some family or some relatives or something and not knowing what was going on. All I knew is that my mum was not doing okay and maybe that was somehow my fault because that's what you think when you're little. I also had parents who really did believe that there was nothing wrong with a good belting or a good smack and were quite free with that. But it was more than just a smack. So it was the beltings that would leave me with welts and bruises all over my legs and my backside. It was the bloodied nose and the black eye when I was 5. It was that my mother would dob me into my father when he got home from work and let him dish out the punishment. And I recall so often just sitting there quaking in fear, waiting for my father to come home and not understanding what had I done wrong for my mother to not want to protect me and nurture me. I now understand why, but at the time when you're a little child, all you know is fear. And nothing ever felt good enough. I tried for my entire life to get my parents' approval. There was that one time, and we all hang on to these. We all have our different types of trauma. Sometimes it's our capital T traumas, like the abuse perhaps. And then there's the little t traumas. When I was in grade 3, I came home from school and I was so happy. I'd got 95 out of 100 on a spelling test, the top in the whole school for spelling. And my mother's only response was, well, what happened to the other 5? There was no congratulations. That's awesome. When I graduated from high school, I recall saying to my parents, well, aren't you proud of me? And they were like, no, we just expected that. I got into university and there was well, and we expected that too. When I dropped out of university, my father was so disappointed in me that he didn't speak to me for a year. And so when I dropped out of university and I started to find jobs, I had no idea what I wanted to do once I dropped out of uni. I went to uni intending to be a high school teacher and then realized I didn't really like children all that much, and teaching probably wasn't the best profession for somebody who didn't like children. So I fell into sales. I got a job helping out in an office where they sold stuff. And I found out I was pretty good at it because I was really good at reading people. I was a good communicator and I was an excellent listener. And I could really figure out how to craft a solution to give people what they needed. But to explain this to my parents about this job that I had and I was being really great at sales, I was simply just told, you know what, you've just got the gift of the gab. You can just talk a lot. That's why you're good at it. Or they simply had no idea what I did. They could not understand what I did. In addition to that, there were always comments on my weight. So when I was growing up, I was super skinny. I could not put on weight. I was an absolute stick figure. And, I remember being at school when all of my girlfriends were starting to, to get their first bras. And I'm like, no, I didn't need one. I was so skinny and so petite, but very, very tall. So I was like a baby giraffe, I guess. And so I went from being super skinny, and then I was picked on for being super skinny, and I was picked on for having no boobs. I was picked on for having freckles, but it was mostly my weight that I was teased about. And I was teased for being skinny. And there was always comments about it in my family. And those comments continued my entire life with my family. Every time I would go and see my mum, there'd be a comment about, you wouldn't want to put on any more weight. Because lo and behold, I did put on weight, and I put on too much weight. It's when I discovered that I was actually an emotional eater. So then there was always comments about my weight, that you wouldn't want to put on any more weight, or you've gained some weight. There was always an observation, and my weight became my worth as well. So now I wasn't being approved of for what I was achieving, and I wasn't being approved of for how I looked. I got married and I had 2 gorgeous children out of my first marriage. But I went into my marriage with such low self-worth and thinking that this person's being nice to me, and this person's being kind to me, and this person's telling me that they love me. So that's going to make it okay. It's all going to be fine. Because I didn't really know what true unconditional love felt like. So we were together for 15 years, married for 11 years, and a couple of children. But during that time, there was a consistent cycle of, and I didn't know it was abuse at the time. I did not know, because this was normal to me. This is the thing about abuse. It's so insidious. If this is what you've grown up with, you know no different. You think this is just normal. Now, my first husband was unfaithful to me and started to cheat on me. And, of course, I was shattered because, I wanted to hold together my family. I had 2 young kids. I had a house. And I wanted that dream of the perfect family and the white picket fence. But he was unfaithful. And he was at times cruel. And so remarks such as, you're fat, and you're ugly and I'm embarrassed to be seen in public with you. You make me look bad. They cut me to my core. And they still, for many, many years, that affected me so deeply. I remember, telling my mum that my marriage had ended. And, she said to me, oh, you made him do too much with the children because, I was also not a good mother, according to my mother. And I remember then saying, but Mum, he's been sleeping with other women. And her only response was, well, you did put on some weight, dear. So again, my weight, all of what I was, it was my fault that my marriage had ended. It was my fault that my husband had cheated on me because I was not perfect and I was not lovable. I married again. I married a man who was the complete opposite of my first husband because I thought if I got somebody who was the opposite of the first one, then that would be the right man for me. Could not have been further from the truth. And again, I was so desperate to prove that I was loved. My first marriage had ended. I was so ashamed of that because I thought people must think there's something wrong with you, Margaret, because you come across as this really nice person, but yet your husband's cheating on you. There must be something wrong with you. So I honestly, I rushed into my second marriage because he love bombed me. He gave me jewelry. He was very kind. So I thought he told me lovely things about myself. And so my self-esteem lifted enough for me to go, okay, all right, this is good. And I felt that getting married again would prove to other people that I was okay. I was desirable and I was nice and there would be nice things that could happen because I was getting married again. And yet that didn't last. That didn't last at all because I kept marrying the same kind of man. And he too cheated on me, but this time with only a couple of years. But in addition to the hurt that comes with being lied to and cheated on, he took away a little more of my self-worth, or rather I gave away a little more of my self-worth. He told me that my intelligence was intimidating to him. And could I be a little less intelligent so that to make him feel better? He told me that my drive and my motivation in life was intimidating and was a turn-off for him. He told me that I was too mumsy. I don't even know what too mumsy means. But here I was being told by one husband, you're too fat, you're too ugly, you're too this, you're too that. And then being told again, but this time it's like, you're too smart, you're too motivated. So it was like every time I turned around and I was in a relationship with somebody, and whether that it was a romantic relationship or in my family, I was being told I was too much of something. And sometimes they were at complete opposites with each other. So I didn't know. All I knew was that I'm not okay. But I just kept getting this message that said to me, if you can be what other people want you to be, then you can be loved, then you can be approved of, and then you can be accepted. And until you can do that, Margaret, you're never going to know what love is. You'll never be accepted. You'll never be approved of. And so I went, okay, let's be who the people want me to be. And so I started to craft masks for myself. I crafted a work Margaret and a mum Margaret and a friend Margaret, all these different versions. And I threw myself into work because here I was a single mother, 2 kids, 2 failed marriages, a mortgage and responsibilities. And I said, you know what, I'm going to throw myself into work because when I was at work, that was the one thing in my life that was going really, really successfully for me. I kept getting promoted into, better jobs and change jobs and earn more money and get a better title. And I was really, really committed to growing and having a successful career. So I gave up on the concept of ever knowing what unconditional love would be. I thought, that's not for me. I suck at marriage. This is what I used to say. I suck at marriage and I suck at relationships, but I'm a good mum and I'm good at work. So I'm just going to throw myself into that. And so I did. And I did go into a new relationship with a lovely man. It took a little while, for me to come out and start to trust again. But we kept boundaries between each other and we're still together 7.5 years later. But there's still boundaries. So I have my house and I have my life, and he has his life and he has his house. And the thing that was interesting to me was even when unconditional love was right there in front of me, I didn't know it because I didn't know what it looked like. And yet here it was staring me in the face. And here was me doing everything I almost possibly could to try and sabotage it because it felt so unfamiliar to me. So work, yeah, I threw myself into work, and I got promoted and then I changed jobs and I ended up being the senior vice president of a global software business. And this was everything I thought I had ever wanted. I had the title, I had the career, I had the money, I had everything I thought I had ever wanted. And my kids were doing pretty well as well. They were doing well at school and they were doing exceptionally well with their sporting activities, state level and elite level athletics and life saving. And so if you looked at my Instagram or my Facebook feeds going back a couple of years ago, you just saw that we were living the life. I was traveling a lot for work and I was getting to do some pretty awesome things and go to some pretty awesome places. Was posting photos of my kids and how amazing they were. From the outside looking in, you'd think that Margaret had it all together. But in fact, Margaret, me, was deeply insecure. And everything that I did was to prove that I was worthy and to prove that I was worthy of love and acceptance. And so I threw everything I had into creating and then maintaining this veneer of perfection, because perfection equals love, or so I thought. And then COVID hit. And suddenly everything wasn't the same anymore. And for us here where I live in Melbourne, Australia, we were the most locked down city in the world for almost 2 years. And so my children, were being educated at home. And all of their sporting stops, so all of the things that we had done so much traveling together and everything where I could say, oh, my kids are amazing, look at my fabulous kids. Suddenly they weren't doing that anymore. And what became apparent from not only my children, but so many others as well, is mental illness crept in. Now, my oldest son had had a battle with quite chronic depression and anxiety for many, many years, which we'd kept fairly quiet because, again, it was suggested to me at one stage that my son's mental health was a result of my poor mothering. And so I'm certainly not going to go talking about that out loud now, am I? And now I had my younger son with depression and anxiety, diagnosed with ADHD, and drugs becoming a part of our family as well. Now, that's his story to tell, so I'm not going to go into that. But all I can say is when you have a child who is abusing drugs, it's a really, really stressful place to be. And it's a place of shame to be in as well. So I thought at the time. So now I've got kids who aren't being successful. And I'm not the perfect mother because my children aren't achieving. So what's left for me is work. So I threw myself into work even more. But then I stopped succeeding at work. So all of my success that I'd had for years and years of, smashing out targets and making all of my numbers and being the top person in the company, it wasn't happening anymore. And suddenly I'm like, oh my God, I'm not even great at work. And I realized that I had such a reliance of drawing so much self-esteem and self-worth out of my work. And now I wasn't great at work anymore. So suddenly I'm like, I'm not great at anything. I'm not great at relationships. I'm not great as a mother, and I'm not great at my career. I'm not great at anything. And I kept trying to wear the masks and I kept trying to pretend. And here's where it got really ugly. I developed depression, anxiety, chronic stress. I withdrew. I became isolated. I became quite paranoid. And my self-worth, which was already pretty low, it went even lower. And so on the surface, I had everything I thought I had ever wanted, and yet I had never been more miserable and more unhappy in my entire life. And then one day, I had just chest pain. I had so much pain in my chest and I could hardly breathe, and I thought I was having a heart attack. But this was familiar to me because this was actually the third time in 5 years that I had experienced this. And each time I ended up in hospital, and each time they said, you're just a little bit stressed. It's just an anxiety attack. Go home, stress less, you'll be okay. And every time I would just take a week off work and just rest for a bit, get a bit of sleep, and then I would go back to work. But this time was different. This time I knew that I was so sick, and I wasn't just physically sick. I was sick right down to my heart. My heart hurt for the life that I was living and how I was feeling about myself. I truly had zero self-worth left and felt like I honestly had nothing left to offer to anybody. And so I turned to literally anything, absolutely anything. I'm like, I am so unhappy in my life. I am so unhealthy. I will try anything at all to feel better. So you know what? Come at me with all of your woo-woo and all of your alternative therapies, because I'm willing to try literally anything because I feel like I'm going to die. And so I did. And things that I had once upon a time thought were absolute rubbish, like meditation, like breathing, mindfulness, deep hypnotherapy, I thought that was all rubbish. Like, people used to say to me, you know what, just think some happy thoughts. Just change your mindset, be more positive. You know, you should try meditating, Margaret. Meditation will really, really help. My GP had been saying this to me for years. You know, when I would sit in front of her and my blood pressure was 210 on 140, and she's putting me on blood pressure medication, telling me that I'm at risk of a stroke or a heart attack, and she's telling me to try meditating as well. I'm going, that's rubbish. If sitting still and just thinking happy thoughts and doing some breathing would actually work, don't you think everybody would be doing it? And then my next thought was, meditating for 15 minutes? Do you know what I could do in that 15 minutes? Are you serious? Like, I can send like another 10 emails. I can get 2 loads of washing done. I can get so much done with that. But this time I'm like, you know what? I'll do it. I will do whatever it takes. I will try all of this crazy stuff and I will see what happens. And so I did it. And lo and behold, over a period of time, this changed my life. And I went from being sick and depressed and unhappy and hating my life to loving my life and loving it so much and being so excited about this work that I quit my job. Everybody thought I was crazy. I was earning $250,000 a year. I had everything I thought I had ever wanted. I was a single mother with a mortgage, and I quit my job to go and spend my life teaching women how they too can live a happy life. And so as a result of that, I put together a program which is a direct result of everything that I did. So what I'd love to share with you now is how I went from being that depressed, unhappy Margaret, wearing masks and thinking that she needed to be perfect in order to be loved. And now I'm going to share with you my 7 steps to living a happy life. So let's do this. So a little about me. So as we said before, I am the founder and CEO of Queen of My Own Universe, which is a women's empowerment community. And I'm a happiness coach. My job is all about teaching you how to live a happy life. I'm a recovering perfectionist. We've covered that now, and a survivor of burnout. And a co-author in a book which is called Goodbye Busy, Hello Happy, which is all about teaching you to say goodbye to busy, how to break up with being busy and find your happy in life. So this is where perfect got me. So that's a photo of me, you know, because we live in this selfie world, right? This was a selfie of me the first time I went to hospital. And I put it on Facebook. I was like, oh, look at me, look at me. We share everything that we just don't need to. The second and the third trips to hospital, I didn't take selfies. And in fact, I didn't tell anybody except for the people that really needed to know and the people at work, because I was so deeply ashamed of the fact that I was not coping. I just couldn't bear to tell anybody. So I developed 7 steps to living a happy life based on what I did to get over my burnout and over my perfectionism and live my happy life. So it's all about getting you from where you are to living a life that you love, understanding what's really important to you and how to live a little bit of that every single day. And also, how can we help our body to rest and to recover physically and mentally? So the first step in our 7 steps is to get really clear about what you don't want to have in your life. Now, this is literally as simple as writing down a list of all the stuff in your life that you wish you could get rid of. Now, don't stop and think about how possible it is or how likely or how you could do that. Literally, if you would rather not have this in your life, write it down. Think about your emotions and your feelings that you'd rather not be. So are you feeling stressed and anxious and tired and sad, frustrated, confused? Write it down. Unless you want to feel that way, write it down. What people or situations are bringing you stress or unhappiness? So maybe there are friendships or relationships or family members. We're not doing anything yet now, we're just writing it down. Think about your workplace. Is your workplace toxic or healthy? How is your relationship? And the big one, how do you feel about yourself? Do you doubt yourself and lack confidence? I work with so many women who simply say, I've got no confidence in myself. I don't believe in myself, or the inner critic or the imposter syndrome that comes up. Or maybe you look in the mirror and you just don't like what you see. This is something I'm working through at the moment as I really, really confront my own ongoing issues around binge eating and emotional eating, which go all the way back to my childhood. So simply write a list. Now, the first time I ever did this exercise, my list was like a page and a half long. It was a huge list. And I'm like, man, there is a lot of shit in my life that I want to get rid of. Writing it down is a really, really good starting point. But then what are we going to do with this list? We're going to move into step 2, which is to start imagining what you do want instead. So if you could wave a magic wand, if you could truly create the life of your dreams, what would it be? And this is really focusing on how I want to feel and think and act and live. Now, as you start to do this, your mind may start to talk you out of it. It might say, yeah, but how are you going to do that? How likely is that for you? I want to try and just ignore that for now. Just dream a little. So if you're stuck for ideas, and sometimes go back to the list of things that you said you don't want and see whether the opposite of that is what you would like instead. For a lot of women, when I do this work with them, this is a really hard list to come up with. I remember working with one client and, she was like, I'm stressed and I'm anxious and I'm tired. And, I'm like, well, how do you want your life to be? Her response simply was, less shit. Now, we're going to aim a little higher than that, okay? So less stressed, less tired, less sad, less angry. That's not enough. If you are currently stressed, how do you want to be? I want to be calm and peaceful. If you are sad, do you want to be happy? If you are angry, do you want to be content? What is it that you want? Do you want to have healthy and loving relationships in your life? Do you want to just feel like you are enough? Do you want to be able to accept yourself for everything that you are? And so once you've got your list together, we've really got to start to feel into it, because if you just stand in front of the mirror, and affirmations are not something that you do on a regular basis, and you just stand in front of the mirror and you go, I am calm and peaceful, and right now you are stressed, and you just stand there and say, I am calm and peaceful, your mind is going to go, yeah, you're not. And it will start talking you out of it before the words have even finished coming out of your mouth. Because that's what your mind does. Your mind has one job, and that is to keep you safe. But it thinks that safe is what it knows right now. So when you start to say that you are something different than what you are right now, your mind goes, oh, no, we're not. No, we're not. We can't be that. Because it doesn't have a filter which says what is good or bad or right or wrong. It just says what I know equals safe, what I don't know equals unsafe. And we need to really feel into this. We need to bring back our emotions. For so many of us, we have numbed our feelings. We've forgotten how to feel our good feelings. We've spent so much time in our suffering feelings that it's so hard to get back into our good feelings. So here's an exercise that I'd like you to do. Once you've got your list of how you'd like to feel, and let's just take the one of, I am strong and confident, because who doesn't want to feel that? I know that's on the top of my list every single time. So we do an exercise. So we close our eyes and we take a breath, let it go. And in your mind, I'd invite you just to see yourself, if you can. And imagine, or just see a woman. If you can't see yourself as this, just see a woman who is standing there strong and confident. And just notice, how is she standing? What is her posture? Does she have her shoulders back, her chest out? What's the tilt of her head? She's probably looking straight ahead. She's not looking down at the ground. She's looking straight ahead. There's probably a glint in her eye. And then look at her as she walks. How is she walking? She's probably, or maybe she's gliding. It's just this effortless, beautiful, smooth walk. I hope you are seeing her. And then as we're seeing her, maybe you're even seeing a color. I often find when I'm doing this visualization, I also see a color as well. And we're doing this as well, just with our hands out, just receiving. And then we're going to take a deep breath in through our nose. So breathing in. And then exhale. And breathe in that confidence again. Breathing in. Breathing in strength and confidence. Now breathe out the strength and confidence. As we breathe in, bring our hands up towards us. And as we breathe out, push your hands away from you as though you are breathing that confidence, almost like into a bubble around you, because this is your space. Now, I recommend doing that at least once a day for each of these affirmations that you want to say. Because if you can see it in your mind, if you can feel it, you maybe even watch yourself adjust your own posture as you do this. And then breathe it in and breathe it out. This will start to make an impact for you in your life. Step number 3 is to know and live your values. So what are your values? So many people, when I ask them this question, what are your personal values? They're like, oh, I don't really know. I think it's this and I think it's probably that. You need to know these values because this is how you hold yourself accountable for all the decisions and the actions that you take in your life. So this is about making sure that everything I do is in alignment. You'll hear that word a lot, alignment. So knowing and living your values is about living in alignment with your true self and what's truly important for you. Now, there's a QR code on your screen there. If you do scan that, it will take you to my website where you can actually download a values evaluation exercise that you can actually help to identify what are your 3 core values in your life. And then see whether the things that you've just said at step 2, these are the things I want in my life, which of my values do they line up with? If you can't scan that QR code, if you go to my website, queenofminduniverse.com, you will find this values evaluation exercise in the resources section for you to be able to download. I also love doing this values exercise with children and families. It's a wonderful conversation to have with your children about the values of our family and how we will treat each other and behave in our family. Step number 4 is all about mindset. You know, and I used to think that this was absolute rubbish. And if I could just think happy thoughts and it would help me get over my anxiety and depression, then I would do that. And it turns out it actually works. And it's called neuroplasticity. There's all the science behind it, but you've got to exercise your mind like a muscle in order to get the results. So if you can commit to thinking differently for 21 days, your brain will actually start to change. So this is doing things such as thinking positive thoughts, doing what I call mindset flips, practicing gratitude. So literally every single night, write down before you go to bed 3 things that you're grateful for. It's amazing what you have to be grateful for in your life. Mindset can also help you to break old and create new habits. So when we think about our mindset as well, this influences how we either react or respond to things. So there are so many things in your life that you cannot control, but how you react or how you respond is 100% on you. But it is also learned behaviors and reactions or survival reactions that we have developed. So when it comes to our mindset as well, oftentimes we find ourselves saying things that our parents used to say. So get curious about what they are. What am I saying that is learned? Also, pay attention. What do you say to yourself when things don't go according to plan? So if you make a mistake or you drop something or something goes wrong that is of your doing, what do you say to yourself? Maybe when something doesn't go right, you're just like, do you expect the worst? And then when it happens, then you're like, see, I told you, nothing good ever happens to me. Because guess what? If you expect the worst, then you're going to get the worst. If when you make a mistake, you say something such as, oh my God, you are such an idiot. You're always screwing things up. So what we want to think about instead is, how can I speak to myself as I would speak to a friend or a child or somebody that I love? If you were with somebody that you loved and they made a mistake, would you turn around and call them an idiot or a moron? Probably not. And I'm suggesting if you did, the friendship might be short-lived. So we do a thing called a mindset flip, all right? Which is, instead of saying that unhelpful negative thing, what could I say instead that particularly takes the emotion out of what I'm saying? So an example of this is, instead of saying, I'm such an idiot, I always screw things up, instead you could say, do you know what, that didn't quite go according to plan, but I can try again. Or if we attempt something and we fail at it, and we say fail like it's some kind of bad thing, instead we can say, you know what, I didn't quite get the result I was hoping for, but I've learnt a lot and I can do better next time. Just see the difference between I'm such a failure and didn't quite get the outcome I was hoping for, but I've learnt from it. I'm going to give it another try. There's such different energies between the two. So I suggest writing a list of all the things that you catch yourself saying that are negative and see if you can create some alternatives instead. Step number 5 is all about mindfulness and the science of this, which is about how we calm our sympathetic nervous system and enable our parasympathetic nervous system to take over. So our sympathetic nervous system is all about fight or flight, or maybe it's freeze or fawn, whatever one of those responses that you have, that is all about your sympathetic nervous system. We want to let the parasympathetic take over. So it is our rest and digest nervous system. This is why when we get really stressed about things, for a lot of us, we get really, really upset tummy. Like, that's because our parasympathetic nervous system is not engaged and our sympathetic one is just going ping, 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 ping. So we want to stop that pinging and that adrenaline rush that's going on there. And there's lots of ways to do this. My favorite is breathing, because we can do this anywhere, anytime. The reality is everybody can be a great breather, because you have to breathe to stay alive. It's about learning proper breathing that is not just the bare minimum breathing I need to do to stay alive, but actual breathing that is beneficial to me. So our deep, slow belly breathing is stimulating our vagus nerve, which lowers our heart rate, and it also connects to your digestive system. So if you own a smartwatch, like an Apple Watch or something, and you've got a heart rate or a heart rate monitor, a really interesting exercise to do is to turn that on, open up the heart rate app, and then start to do some breathing. So turn it on, take a note of your heart rate, and then do 3 deep breaths. And then have a look at what happens to your heart rate. But the key thing about deep breathing is to do it correctly. When we're normally breathing, we're typically breathing in and out through our nose, and it's quite shallow. So we're really only doing chest breathing. So we're only breathing into about the top third of our lungs. Our lungs are actually quite big, and they go all the way down and right up into under our diaphragm. So we want to be able to breathe and completely fill our lungs up with beautiful, beautiful oxygen. And so we're going to breathe a little differently. So let's do an exercise of this now. Now, when we're doing deep breathing, the mechanics of the breathing are typically in through the nose and exhaling out through the mouth. But when we're exhaling, we're not blowing out a candle. It's not blowing out like a candle, like we're breathing out like a ha or a sigh. Just and just let the body go as you exhale. That's why sighing feels so good, right? Now, there's different breathing techniques. There is box breathing. There is the 4-4, which is 4-4-4-4. There's the 4-7-8. There's so many different types of breathing techniques. If you Google breathing techniques, you will find so many of them. The most simple one that you can learn is just to breathe in for 4 and pause, exhale for 4 and pause. So let's do that now. Let's breathe in for 4, breathing in. And pause. And then exhale slowly. and pause. And breathing in again. And pause and exhale. And pause. Now, if you were to do that for a minute and observe your heart rate, you would watch your heart rate come down. You would feel your stress come down. You would feel the tension leaving your body as you do it. So I strongly encourage you, Google breathing techniques, go and learn more about it. There's so many and they are so beneficial. Meditation is the other one that everybody talks about. I used to say I'm terrible at meditating. I cannot turn my mind off. This stuff's rubbish, but it works. So again, go and find some guided meditations. Just start with 2 or 3 minutes. Your mind is going to wander away, and that's okay. When you notice that it's wandered, just come back to the sound of what you're listening to. And there's plenty of mindfulness activities as well. So again, just find something that works for you. My other favorite one is journaling, and it only needs to be 1 or 2 minutes a night. And get out in nature. Just go out in nature and breathe and enjoy. One of the most transformative pieces of work that I ever did in this whole entire journey, and this is really what helped me to heal the deepest, is inner child work. So little you holds the secrets to your happiness. So our inner child has 8 core needs. Now, you don't have to have had a really horrible childhood to have not had all of your needs fully met when you were growing up. And any of your needs that were not fully met when you were a child, guess what? You're still carrying those needs about with you today. So the key is to learn how to reparent yourself and give yourself now what you didn't receive then. And that's the key, is I'm going to give it to myself. I'm not going to keep looking for others to give it to me. There's a QR code there on your screen. So again, that QR code is going to take you to my website where you can download a free inner child guided meditation that I have recorded. And this is what I do with all of my coaching clients, is this specific meditation. So meeting and connecting with your inner child through meditation is the most gentle way to access her and just get to know her and listen to her. And our last step in our 7 steps is connection. So we aren't meant to do life alone. So it's really interesting to pay attention to the people around you where you feel your energy lifted up. You know, you can sometimes be with some people and they just feel like energy vampires, like they're just like sucking the energy and sucking the life out of you. And then there are people that when you're with them and you don't even know why, they just light you up. You want to spend more time with them, and when you leave having spent time with them, you just feel so good. So go find those people and figure out how you can spend even more time with them. So some ways of doing this is maybe it's in volunteering. God knows there are so many organizations in our communities that need even just a couple of hours a month of people coming to help them and support them. Especially if you're not in a position to be able to give financial support, a few hours a month of your time and of your love is such a precious, precious gift. And you will find like-minded and like-spirited people there. Things such as women's circles, mothers groups, yoga classes, self-care activities that you can do with others are super powerful as well. Get out in nature. So wherever you are living in the world, whether you are by the beach, you are in the forest, you've got beautiful nature around you, just get out. Even if it's just go for a walk around the block and smile at every person. But joining groups that do activities in nature is a beautiful way. And something else to consider is learning a new skill or studying a new course, preferably in person. You know, after so long in lockdown and isolation, if we can get back out. So maybe there's a community college or a community organization or a school or a university near you that offers a course that you've always been interested in studying. Maybe it's a language, maybe it's salsa dancing, maybe it's singing, maybe it's cooking. Go do it, because you're going to find other people who are also similarly interested in activities just like you. So they are my 7 steps to living a happy life. Now, if any of that resonates with you, I would love you to come and join us in our Queen community. So you'll see all the details there on the screen. So the website is queenofmyownuniverse.com. We are on Facebook, Sarah. There is the Queen of My Own Universe community on Facebook. It's a private community, so people can come along. They can share with the other queens in the community anything that they would like to. And we talk about all sorts of things. And we're on Instagram there as well at Queen of My Own Universe 1. You can find me on LinkedIn at Margaret Foley. And I also do a podcast. I put out 1 or 2 episodes a week, which is called Living the Queen Life. Now, I love our podcasts. We talk to ordinary women with extraordinary stories and doing extraordinary things. And some of them are women with really powerful stories that other women listen to them and go, yep, she is me. That's me. We talk to women who've overcome some incredible adversity in their life. We talk about topics that women are interested in. We talk about menopause. We talk about sex. We talk about weight. We talk about relationships. We talk about children. We talk about mental health. So I would love for you to find Living the Queen Life podcast. It is on all podcasting platforms. And if you're listening to this and you would love to be a guest on Living the Queen Life podcast, please do get in contact with me. I interview women from all over the world to come and be guests on my podcast. So if you'd like to know more, our 7 Steps for Living a Happy Life program is also launching as a full online program. So you will be able to do the 7 Steps to Living a Happy Life program, self-paced, self-directed from absolutely anywhere in the world, anytime that you want to. Thank you all so much for joining me today.